Millions of people adored him at the peak of his career, and then, just like that, he was gone. Jon Stewart, one of the most influential comedians and political commentators of his generation, walked away from The Daily Show in 2015, leaving fans and critics alike stunned. How could a man who turned a satirical news program into a cultural phenomenon simply vanish from the spotlight? What really happened behind the scenes? This is the untold story of Jon Stewart's surprising exit from The Daily Show, a journey marked by passion, purpose, and a relentless search for meaning. To truly understand Jon Stewart's decision, we must first revisit the roots of his rise. Born Jonathan Stewart Leibowitz on November 28, 1962, in New York City, Stewart grew up in a Jewish family in Lawrenceville, New Jersey. His childhood was marked by intellectual curiosity and a sharp sense of humor, a defense mechanism against the bullying he experienced as a child. Comedy was not just an escape for Stewart, it became a tool for survival and self-expression. After graduating from the College of William and Mary in Virginia, where he studied psychology, Stewart embarked on a journey that would take him from the gritty stand-up comedy clubs of New York City to the heights of American television. But his path was far from straightforward. He worked odd jobs, including as a bartender and a puppeteer for children with disabilities, before finally breaking into the world of stand-up. His big break came in 1993 with The Jon Stewart Show on MTV, a quirky late-night talk show that showcased his razor-sharp wit and everyman charm. Although it lasted only 2 seasons, it caught the attention of industry insiders and paved the way for his career in television. Stewart's unique blend of sarcasm, humor, and sincerity set him apart in a crowded field. But it was in 1999, when Stewart took over as host of The Daily Show from Craig Kilborn, that his career truly exploded. Under Stewart's leadership, the show transformed from a lighthearted parody of news into a groundbreaking platform for political satire. Stewart didn't just make fun of politicians, he held them accountable, asking tough questions that mainstream media often avoided. His biting commentary on the Iraq War, the 2008 financial crisis, and the absurdities of American politics made him a voice of reason in a chaotic world. Yet behind the laughter, Stewart was carrying a heavy burden. By 2015, after 16 years of relentless pressure, he was exhausted. The constant cycle of news, the endless battles against misinformation, and the moral weight of his role as a cultural commentator took their toll. In interviews, Stewart later admitted that he had begun to feel disconnected, as if he were playing a role rather than living his own life. But exhaustion was only part of the story. Stewart had always been a man of deep convictions. Throughout his time on The Daily Show, he used his platform to advocate for causes he cared about, from veterans' rights to healthcare reform. Yet he increasingly felt that he could do more for these causes outside the confines of a satirical comedy show. After his departure, Stewart didn't simply fade into obscurity. Instead, he pivoted to direct activism, becoming a fierce advocate for 9/11 first responders, often appearing before Congress to demand health care and support for those who had sacrificed so much. He also launched new creative projects, including a return to television with The Problem with Jon Stewart on Apple TV+. But the road beyond The Daily Show was not without its challenges. For Jon Stewart, stepping away from the satirical anchor desk did not mean stepping away from the fight. If anything, his battles grew more intense, more personal, and at times, more disheartening. Stewart's activism brought him into the heart of Washington's labyrinthine bureaucracy, a world where common sense often seemed lost in a maze of red tape and political posturing. He quickly learned that championing a cause in front of a cheering audience was one thing. Fighting for that cause in the corridors of power was another. One of his most notable crusades was his relentless advocacy for 9/11 first responders. For years, many of these heroes, firefighters, police officers, and paramedics who had rushed to the World Trade Center on that fateful day, were left battling chronic illnesses caused by toxic exposure while struggling to secure adequate health care. Stewart became their voice, testifying before Congress multiple times. In one particularly emotional appearance in 2019, Stewart's voice broke as he rebuked lawmakers for their apparent apathy. "They did their jobs with courage, grace, tenacity. It's time for you to do yours," he declared, staring down the silent faces of Congress members. His words echoed far beyond the hearing room, a stark reminder that behind every policy debate were human lives. But even as Stewart fought for first responders, he never lost his broader sense of compassion. His work at the Hock-Hoxon Farm Foundation, the animal sanctuary he co-founded with his wife Tracy, was more than a side project. It was a sanctuary not just for animals, but for Stewart himself. The farm became a place where he could reconnect with something pure and uncorrupted. Surrounded by rescued animals, cows, pigs, chickens, and even a blind horse, Stewart found a different kind of audience. One that didn't care about his fame, only his kindness. Yet there were times when his activism seemed to collide with the cynicism of the world he had once mocked. His return to television in 2021 with The Problem with Jon Stewart on Apple TV Plus was an attempt to re-engage with the issues that mattered to him: veterans' rights, systemic injustice, climate change. But it also exposed him to a new world of online scrutiny. Critics claimed his new show lacked the sharp comedic edge of The Daily Show. Others argued that in an age dominated by social media outrage, even Stewart's moral clarity seemed muted. For a man who had once effortlessly shaped the national conversation, this new media landscape was a different beast. But Stewart has never been a man to shy away from a fight. If anything, he thrives in adversity. At the heart of his journey lies a relentless quest for authenticity, a desire to speak the truth, even when it's uncomfortable. His humor has always been his weapon, but beneath the jokes lies a fierce empathy. This was evident not just in his public battles, but in his personal life. As a husband to Tracy and a father to their 2 children, Stewart remained grounded. In interviews, he often spoke about how his family was his sanctuary, a place where he could shed the persona of the satirical commentator and simply be Jon. And his children, in turn, grew up watching a father who never stopped standing up for what he believed in, whether that meant defending first responders, protecting animals, or challenging lawmakers who shirked their responsibilities. For them, their father was not just a famous comedian, but a man who cared deeply about the world and those within it. Looking back, Jon Stewart's story is one of evolution. From a stand-up comic in New York's gritty clubs to the iconic host of The Daily Show, from a fiery political satirist to a passionate advocate for the voiceless, Stewart has worn many hats, but his core has remained unchanged. His sharp wit, his relentless curiosity, his capacity for empathy, all these qualities have defined his career and his character. Yet even as he has aged, Stewart's humor has never lost its edge. Whether delivering a scathing monologue on The Problem with Jon Stewart, addressing Congress with righteous indignation, or simply exchanging banter with his farm's followers on social media, his voice remains clear and unmistakable. Today, Jon Stewart is more than a comedian. He is a cultural institution, a voice of reason in a world that often seems overwhelmed by chaos. He has made his audience laugh, but more importantly, he has made them think, challenging them to see beyond the headlines, to question the narratives, and to care about the issues that truly matter. But perhaps his greatest legacy is not a punchline, a television show, or even a passionate speech before Congress. It is the idea that comedy can be more than just an escape, that it can be a tool for truth, a force for justice, and a beacon of empathy. Jon Stewart has shown that even the sharpest satirists can have the softest hearts. And as he continues his journey, whether standing before lawmakers, rescuing animals on his farm, or simply spending time with his family, One thing is clear. Jon Stewart is not just a man who tells jokes. He is a man who makes a difference. Stewart's influence on American media is impossible to overstate. Long before fake news became a term weaponized by politicians, Jon Stewart was using satire to expose the contradictions, hypocrisies, and absurdities of mainstream news. His 2004 confrontation on CNN's Crossfire was a masterclass in unscripted candor, an event that transformed him from a mere comedian to a cultural critic. In front of millions, Stewart accused the show's hosts of contributing to America's toxic political climate, calling their style of debate theater rather than meaningful discourse. His words were a scalpel, slicing through the pretense of serious journalism. The exchange went viral, leaving one host visibly flustered and the other defensive. Months later, CNN canceled Crossfire, a move that many attributed directly to Stewart's blistering critique. This was Jon Stewart's unique power, the ability to hold a mirror up to those in positions of influence and force them to confront their own flaws. But as he wielded humor as a weapon, Stewart was never purely a cynic. Beneath the barbs and punchlines was a deep-seated sense of justice, a desire to make the world better, not just funnier. In 2015, when Stewart stepped away from The Daily Show after 16 years and over 2,600 episodes, his departure marked the end of an era. To the casual viewer, it might have seemed like just another career shift, but for millions, it felt like a loss, a silencing of a voice that had spoken truth to power. Yet for Stewart, it was a long overdue step toward balance. His relentless schedule had become a strain, keeping him away from his wife, Tracy McShane, and their 2 children. For a man who had spent his career critiquing the world's chaos, it was time to seek peace within his own. But Jon Stewart was never meant to fade quietly into domesticity. The same sense of justice that drove him to skewer political hypocrisy found new expression. In 2015, alongside his wife, Tracy, a passionate animal rights advocate, Stewart co-founded the Hock Hoxon Farm Foundation in New Jersey. What began as a safe haven for injured and neglected farm animals soon became a family mission. Their children helped care for the animals, learning empathy and responsibility in a hands-on setting. For the Stewarts, the sanctuary was not just a retreat. It was an extension of their values. Stewart's advocacy did not end with animal rights. He became a fierce champion for 9/11 first responders, whose health issues were often ignored by a slow-moving bureaucracy. Standing before Congress, Stewart's voice quivered with anger as he demanded better health care for these heroes. It was not comedy. It was raw, unfiltered outrage, a reminder that Stewart's empathy was as profound as his wit. His speeches went viral, inspiring a wave of public support and ultimately forcing lawmakers to take action. To this day, many first responders credit Stewart with giving them a voice when they felt abandoned by their government. But while his activism earned him admiration, it also reflected a deeper frustration, one that had been building for years. As the media landscape grew more polarized, with sensationalism replacing substance, Stewart found himself at odds with the very industry he had spent his career critiquing. The Daily Show had once been a satirical lighthouse, guiding young viewers through the fog of misinformation. But over time, Stewart began to wonder if he was part of the problem, if his jokes were merely numbing audiences to the very issues they should have been outraged about. This existential dilemma fueled his departure, but it also sparked his evolution. In 2021, Stewart returned to television with The Problem with Jon Stewart on Apple TV+. No longer confined by the rigid format of a nightly show, Stewart's new platform allowed him to dive deeply into complex issues: veterans' health care, climate change, systemic racism, with the same sharp wit, but a renewed sense of purpose. Interviews were no longer 5-minute segments, but thoughtful conversations. He was not just mocking the news, he was dissecting it, challenging it, and exploring solutions. Yet even amid his serious pursuits, Stewart never lost his humor. Whether speaking at congressional hearings, delivering keynote addresses, or simply engaging with fans, his sharp wit and heartfelt sincerity continued to resonate. Asked once about his farm sanctuary, he quipped, "I always wanted to retire into a very small zoo." But beneath the joke was a man who had chosen to lead by example, using his platform to fight for those without a voice, whether they were sick first responders or abandoned farm animals. Stewart's protégés, John Oliver, Samantha Bee, and Stephen Colbert, continued his legacy on their own shows, each carving out a unique place in the world of political satire. But even as they flourished, Stewart's impact was irreplaceable. His ability to combine humor with heart, to expose hypocrisy while offering hope, remains unmatched. He was never just a comedian. He was a truth-teller, a crusader, and ultimately a compassionate human being. His personal life mirrored his values. As a father, Stewart was determined to be present, a stark contrast to his hectic years on The Daily Show. Family dinners replaced late-night scripts, bedtime stories replaced political monologues. His children grew up learning the value of kindness, both to people and animals, and his wife, Tracy, remained his unwavering partner, not just in marriage, but in their shared mission of making the world a kinder place. Jon Stewart's story is not merely one of success, but of evolution, a journey from stand-up comedy to cultural criticism, from satire to sincere advocacy. And through it all, one truth remains clear. Jon Stewart never just made people laugh. He made them think, he made them care, and in his own irreverent way, he made the world a better place. Jon Stewart's departure from The Daily Show in 2015 marked the end of an era, but it was far more than just the closing of a chapter. It was the beginning of something new. In a career built on sharp wit and relentless satire, Stewart chose to step away from the spotlight, not in retreat, but in search of a deeper purpose. For years, he had been the comedic voice of reason in a world overwhelmed by noise and confusion. His razor-sharp critiques of politics, media, and societal absurdities had earned him a loyal following. But as much as the world relied on his voice to make sense of the chaos, Stewart recognized the importance of listening to his own inner voice, one that yearned for balance and more meaningful connections. As Stewart bid farewell to the nightly grind, his fans mourned the loss of a figure who had reshaped the landscape of American television. But for Stewart, the decision to leave was not one made lightly. It was a conscious choice to recalibrate his life. For nearly 2 decades, he had sacrificed family dinners, bedtime stories, and time with his children, all in the name of providing timely, impactful commentary on the world. But over time, the toll of that commitment became undeniable. In interviews after his departure, Stewart shared the deep conflict he had felt. "It's one thing to make people laugh," he said. "It's another to make memories with your own family." These words were not just a reflection of the emotional strain that came with his demanding career. They were a personal reckoning. Stewart, a husband to Tracy McShane and father to 2 children, began to realize that the work that had once been his passion had begun to pull him away from the life he truly valued. The fame, the late-night rehearsals, and the endless cycle of news cycles had all but consumed him. The commitment to his family had been sidelined, and Stewart knew that it was time to prioritize what mattered most, being present for his loved ones. But Stewart's departure was not solely about reclaiming his family life. It was also driven by a profound sense of disillusionment with the world around him. By 2015, the media landscape had become increasingly polarized, with sensationalism, misinformation, and deep divisions spreading like wildfire. The very platform that had allowed Stewart to wield satire as a powerful tool to expose hypocrisy now seemed to be part of the very chaos he had once sought to illuminate. "You just feel like you're running in circles," he confessed. "At some point, you have to ask yourself, Are you part of the solution or part of the problem? Stewart's decision to leave the show reflected a larger, more personal struggle. As the world became more fragmented, Stewart found that his role as a satirist was no longer as effective. What had once been an incisive critique of power and absurdity now seemed to be lost in the noise. The media that had once served as a watchdog was now part of the problem. His voice, though still sharp, felt like it was fighting against forces much larger than any single comedian could hope to tame. And so, Stewart stepped back, not as a form of surrender, but as a call for clarity. Yet while Stewart was stepping away from the spotlight, he wasn't retreating into obscurity. If anything, he was preparing for a new phase of his life that would blend the personal with the professional. In 2014, he made his directorial debut with Rosewater, a poignant and thought-provoking drama based on the true story of Maziar Bahari, an Iranian-Canadian journalist imprisoned in Iran. The film was a significant departure from Stewart's roots in comedy, showing a different side of the man who had spent years making audiences laugh. It was a bold statement. Stewart was not merely a comedian. He had a passion for storytelling that transcended the world of satire. In many ways, Rosewater marked the beginning of Stewart's journey into more serious and socially relevant work, as he sought to bring attention to human rights and political injustice. Stewart's decision to expand his creative horizons was not only an artistic choice, it was a reflection of his desire to challenge himself and grow. For years, his ability to craft biting political satire had made him a fixture in the media landscape. But as he admitted, it began to feel like an increasingly futile exercise. The world was changing, and Stewart, ever the thinker, sought a new way to make a meaningful impact. While Stewart's departure from The Daily Show represented a personal reinvention, it was also a reflection of his larger philosophy about fame, media, and personal growth. He understood that celebrity could be fleeting, and the relentless pursuit of relevance could sometimes obscure one's true values. By stepping back, Stewart made the radical choice to evolve and focus on the issues that mattered most to him, not as a television personality, but as a human being. Stewart's decision was also about legacy. He had spent years shaping the cultural dialogue, using comedy to challenge norms and expose injustices. But now, he wanted to see what else he could accomplish. In many ways, Stewart's next chapter would go beyond the microphone, beyond the nightly monologues, to something more grounded, more meaningful, and more personal. His film work, his activism, and his advocacy for causes like 9/11 first responders and animal welfare were the fruits of a deeper calling, one that demanded his attention more than ever before. Stewart's commitment to Hoxton Farm Foundation, the sanctuary he co-founded with his wife Tracy, became one of the clearest reflections of this new direction. In 2015, they created the sanctuary in New Jersey, dedicated to rescuing and rehabilitating farm animals. For Stewart, this project wasn't just about animal rights. It was about instilling a sense of responsibility and empathy in the next generation. The farm became a place where their children could learn the value of compassion and where the Stewarts could make a difference without the glare of the camera. This commitment to animal welfare was also a natural extension of the values Stewart had championed during his career. Whether he was exposing political corruption, calling out corporate greed, or advocating for first responders, Stewart had always fought for those who had no voice. In the farm's quiet fields, Stewart and his family continued this work, creating a sanctuary where the voiceless could find refuge, and where the idea of compassion wasn't just a talking point, it was a practice. And while the media landscape may have changed, Stewart's influence never truly faded. His legacy lived on through the voices of his protégés, John Oliver, Samantha Bee, and Stephen Colbert, who carried forward the lessons Stewart had imparted. His satirical approach to political commentary had reshaped the landscape, and his absence from nightly television did not erase the impact he had made. In fact, his decision to step away from the spotlight only amplified the significance of his legacy. Jon Stewart may have left The Daily Show, But the values he championed, justice, compassion, and the courage to challenge authority, continue to resonate in the work of those who followed in his footsteps. Jon Stewart's journey is a reminder that sometimes the most powerful thing one can do is step away, to leave behind a version of oneself that no longer fits, and to seek a new, truer path. It is a testament to the importance of knowing when to let go, how to evolve, and what it truly means to make a difference. Yet, even as he left the nightly television grind, Jon Stewart's commitment to compassion, truth, and justice never wavered. While others might have ridden their fame into lucrative endorsement deals or endless media appearances, Stewart took a different path, one marked not by self-promotion, but by selflessness. His work with the Hock-Hoxon Farm Foundation, which he co-founded with his wife, Tracy McShane, in 2015, became a profound symbol of that choice. For the Stewarts, the sanctuary was more than just a safe haven for rescued animals. It was a living testament to the values they cherished. Nestled in the quiet expanse of New Jersey, Hock-Hoxon Farm became a refuge for neglected and abused farm animals, cows, pigs, chickens, goats, creatures often overlooked in a world obsessed with speed and consumption. But here, in this peaceful sanctuary, these animals were more than just numbers. They were lives worth protecting. Stewart, who had once wielded satire to expose the hypocrisy of politicians and media moguls, now found himself wielding a shovel, a feed bucket, and a tender hand. It was a quieter form of advocacy, but one no less profound. Their children grew up surrounded by this world of empathy and action. They did not simply hear about kindness, they lived it, learning to care for animals that had known nothing but hardship. Stewart and Tracy transformed the farm into a family project, a place where values were taught not through lectures, but through daily acts of love. And for Jon, who had spent years making millions laugh with biting wit, the farm was a sanctuary for his own soul, a place where he could reconnect with the simplicity of life away from the noise. But while Stewart's commitment to animal welfare became a defining part of his post-television life, his activism reached far beyond the pastures of New Jersey. He continued his relentless advocacy for 9/11 first responders, a cause that had become deeply personal to him. These were the men and women who had rushed into burning towers, who had dug through toxic rubble searching for survivors, only to find themselves forgotten, their health shattered and their sacrifices ignored. Time and again, Stewart stood before Congress, his voice a mix of anger, frustration, and sorrow. In one unforgettable moment in 2019, his voice cracked with emotion as he condemned the lawmakers for their failure to protect those who had risked everything. They did their jobs with courage, grace, tenacity. "It's time for you to do yours," he declared, his words reverberating far beyond the Capitol walls. This was not the voice of a comedian looking for applause. This was a voice of a man whose heart burned with a righteous sense of justice. Stewart's passionate pleas led to real change. His relentless pressure helped secure the reauthorization of the September 11th Victim Compensation Fund, ensuring that those who had sacrificed so much would receive the health care and support they deserved. For the first responders who had felt abandoned, Stewart became a hero, not because of his fame, but because he refused to look away, even when the rest of the world did. And while his days of nightly satire were behind him, Stewart never entirely left the world of media. His return to the spotlight with The Problem with Jon Stewart on Apple TV Plus in 2021 showed a different side of him, a thoughtful, serious commentator unafraid to tackle the most pressing issues of the day. This was not just a revival of his old comedic persona. It was an evolution. His new show explored complex subjects, from veteran healthcare to systemic injustice, with depth and empathy, proving that Stewart's voice could still cut through the noise. Yet, even amid his serious pursuits, Stewart never lost his sense of humor. It was there in his speeches, his interviews, and his social media exchanges. A sharp, disarming wit that could pierce arrogance without losing its humanity. He remained a master of using humor not just to entertain, but to enlighten. In a world that often seems to reward superficiality and self-interest, Jon Stewart has remained a rare figure, a man who traded the blinding spotlight of celebrity for the quieter, more meaningful light of service. His protégés, John Oliver, Samantha Bee, Stephen Colbert, continued to shape the world of political comedy, but Stewart's influence persisted like an echo, a reminder of what satire could be when wielded with integrity. Stewart's story is not just about the laughter he inspired or the debates he ignited. It is about a man who dared to walk away at the height of his fame, not because he was tired of success, but because he understood that success alone was not enough. He chose family over fame, substance over spectacle, compassion over complacency. Today, Jon Stewart is not just a former comedian or a retired television host. He is a father, a husband, an advocate, and a voice of conscience in a world too often distracted by noise. His journey is a testament to the idea that true greatness is not measured by how long you stay in the spotlight, but by what you do with your time once you step out of it. And as he continues his work, whether rescuing animals, advocating for first responders, or speaking out on issues that matter, Jon Stewart remains a force of nature. Not because he is the loudest voice in the room, but because he is one of the truest.